Hi everybody, welcome. This is Karen Burchill, Creative Katie. Today we have a double play. I'm not going to create one art journal page, I'm going to create two, and I'm going to use things that I've built up in my stash to make the process easier. So here's one of the things that was in my stash. It was a page, a 7x10 art journal page that I had done some stamping on, and I had broken the page. So I want to colorize this, and I'm getting inspiration from nature. My friend Nancy took this picture and I love the colors, so I'm going to try to duplicate that on my page. I'm using some Naples yellow and alizarin crimson, and I'm mixing it wet on wet on the page, and wherever I blend those colors together, I'm getting those deep corals that we saw in those echinaceas from my friend's picture. This was a page, I believe there was no gesso on it, so it's taking a little bit, some of the paint is soaking in the page. Usually I prefer having the page gessoed. It just makes blending a little bit easier, but here I'm just adding more layers, adding yellow, adding a little bit more alizarin crimson, just getting a nice blend. You'll notice where I put the Naples yellow, it's a little more opaque, so it's knocking back some of that text that I had stamped with acrylic paint. I'll link the video where I use this stamp and I build a lot of things, build up my stash using a variety of stamps, if you want to check that out. So I'm just building up color here, adding a little bit of yellow. If you let it dry, then you can put the yellows on top, but I wanted a nice blend, some darker, some lighter. This is one of my favorite ways of adding color to a page. It looks like a hot mess, but remember, we're going to be adding more layers to this. Speaking of layers, I am going to use this Harlequin stamp. I'm brayering on black acrylic paint, and I'm just adding that to my background. Now this is a bolder black than what's there because that already has a sheen of color over top of it. And I like how the Harlequin stamp looks with that old English text. I'm putting this on messy, incomplete, and that's just adding to the overall page. This is just a little dot stamp, so I'm just adding a little tiny motif here and there. Just another little detail, almost like splatters, but more controlled, I guess, because I can target where I want it. So this page started with a page that I had broken the page by doing some stamping on it. And then it can sit in your stash till you're ready to use it. Here I'm just edging with some black acrylic paint that I have on that makeup sponge. Kind of frames the page. I probably will end up doing more shading at a later stage. But when I have it on the sponge, I like to use it up. And it gives me an idea of framing the page and somehow helps focus me and guide the next steps. I decided that I'm going to add some more Harlequin stamp, but this time I'm using the Naples yellow and I'm targeting the areas of pink. And I like this look. I've got the Harlequin stamp with black, and now I'm putting another layer with the yellow. One of the things that I try to avoid is using too many different stamps. So often you'll see me using the same stamp with two colors or at two different levels or layers. I'm loving how this has come together. That bold text stamp has been pushed to the back because it's no longer a focal point, and that's when you put things in the first layer, they get pushed back the furthest. So now I'm grabbing this botanical stamp and just adding some of the alizarin crimson, and I'm adding a very fine detail. This doesn't show up a lot, But again, it's all about building interest, adding layers. Not everything needs to be so bold and upfront. So I'm just stamping this around, and you can't see a lot of it on the screen, but it does show up. And again, I'm using the same colors that I started with, that alizarin crimson and the Naples yellow. That was a little too bold, so I just grabbed a cloth, wiped it off, and re-stamped in that area. And because everything is acrylic paint and permanent underneath, I can do that. If it was watercolor, I would not be able to have that option. So now I went to these florals. This is from the stamp set that I did my big Build Your Stash session. I stamped these all out with black acrylic paint, and again, I will link that video. I have a variety of florals. I spent time in front of the TV and I was cutting them out, and now I can just grab them from my stash and play with the composition on my page with some sentiments and make a decision about what fits. But I don't have to dig out that stamp set, start stamping and cleaning that up. Now here's one of those stamp sets that I did the initial stamping on, and now that I've set up my composition, I'm thinking I want some of that text up in some of these other places. It was a little bit void of that, so I did grab out some of that text from this botanical stamp. And I'm just going to add the stamping very strategically where I want it, now that I know where this page is going and what I'm going to do on this page. So I'm just putting the black acrylic paint on, and then I'm just going to stamp up in this corner to add a little bit of text there. I do take some of the Naples yellow and rub it over top just to knock it back a little bit, and that was off camera. I just want a little bit more text, because when I broke the page, I had no idea where that page was going. But now that I do, I can add to it by bringing out those stamps. Now in my mind, this looks a little more finished, a little more ready, and it's going to go with what I'm going to do with this page. So once everything's dry, I am shading with my angle brush and black acrylic paint. This is giving a more diffused shade or edging of the page, which I often prefer. I usually go around. Once it's dry, I can go back if I want to make it darker or bolder in any way. This has come a long way, and I'm absolutely loving. It's kind of vintage, kind of grunge. So now I'm just playing with my stencils, and here I've separated the leaves from it. I'm going to paint the stem in, and I'm going to glue this all down with my fluid matte medium. Those flowers have been stamped on just regular copy paper, nothing fancy, nothing too thick. I prefer the thinness of the copy paper. And because I love the colorful background, I'm going to leave these flowers black and white. So if your background is colorful, think about using an image that is black and white, more neutral. Playing around with a couple of the sentiments from my Through the Garden Gate sentiment pack. I'm thinking I'm going to put the word there. Lots of indecision, but this is the time to play. I decide to bubble cut the word grow. I'm thinking, oh, that's going to work better. And yeah, no, not right at all. So I glue in the one, believe in tomorrow. And I draw, I'm painting in my stem here with a fine line brush. It's looking funny, so I'm just kind of working it, trying to make it work, building up the stem. That's not bad, but I really didn't like it, so you know what? I hid it. I put a word there, bloom, and that just pushes back and hides what I didn't like. Again, these sentiments, I have them in a plastic envelope. They're printed out. They're in my stash and ready to go. Here I'm shading with the black around the flower just to make it stand up a little bit more out of the background. And shading around the sentiment as well. So the background, the broken page was in my stash. The flowers were in my stash. The sentiments were in my stash. And because I didn't have to stop and do that, I was able to get this page done a whole lot faster than I would if I had to start from scratch with every single step. It also made decision making a lot easier. One page done, let's move on. Here is something else that I did in my latest stash building video. I stamped out this text on the plies of napkins, and I have also in my stash this background. It is texturized, but it's been sitting in my stash for a while. So sometimes you want to create, and you create a beautiful background, and then you don't know what to do next. That's okay. Have them sit there. They can be in your stash for when you find the perfect focal image or you get the idea of what to do with it now. And that's what I did with this. So don't feel bad if you have a collection of backgrounds ready to go. Just keep them close at hand, pull them out every once in a while, play with your focal images, your new napkins, your new stamps, and one day it's going to come to you what's going to work on that page, and then you can use the background. So you can see why in this video I was able to give you 2 pages because the background of this was already done. Now, using my DIY collage paper that I've stamped on napkin is perfect in situations where you're gluing something down or you want that stamping on something that's texturized. So this is texturized and it allows me to get in all those nooks and crannies and get a perfect stamp, which I wouldn't get if I was stamping on top of that textured stuff. It also allows me to rip out parts that I like, the size of the text or the script, and target certain areas. Much easier. So again, that was stamped on napkin, and the napkin, the white parts of the napkin go perfectly clear. And here I can just build it out and add. Lovely. So I grab my woodless charcoal pencil, and I'm thinking I'm going to edge this with the charcoal pencil. So I'm just running it along here and then smudging it with my finger. This is another way that you can edge a page. And since I did the other way with the angle brush and acrylic paint on the first page, I thought I'd give you an option. Now the thing about charcoal or your Stabilo all pencil is they are not permanent So when you put them on, you have to be careful of whatever you're going to put on top of that. Now, edging of the page wasn't a problem, but I decided to add a little bit of shading to bring out that textured area. And that's what I'm doing here. And it's doing exactly what I wanted it to. It's bringing that out, and I'm happy with the look of it. But you're going to see a problem right away. So I'm continuing to shade it, bringing out that textured area, that marking, to make a little bit more interest in the background. And I like how that looks. Now I'm going to decide what I want to do. So I have more of these flowers in my stash, and they're even cut out. So how easy is that? And I'm playing with that on the page. But I'm thinking the black and white isn't quite enough color. So, I grab this girl from a napkin and can I put the flowers in her hair? Can I make a collage piece? I like the yellow of that girl. It goes well with the background. And then I have this smiley face cup. And I like the yellow on there. And because the background is very vintage and that cup is so not vintage, I like that combination somehow. Then I think, okay, well, maybe I can put some flowers in this in like a vase, and it's just going to be a fun and funky page. Like I say, you never know what focal image is going to go where. I just match it. Does the color match? And now I'm in my same Through the Garden Gate sentiment pack, and I'm just auditioning the various sentiments and how does it fit? Does it match the theme or the feel of the page? And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. But of course, that's too big. But as luck would have it, in the stash, I had it in a much smaller version. And I think, you know what? Done. This is what I'm going to do. Decision made. But because everything was ready to go, cut out, ready to go, I was able to just play with the elements until I came up with something that I liked. And that's the advantage of having stuff in your stash. But you do need to revisit the pile of clippings, be it magazine clippings or the folder with the flowers. And I go through those things periodically, organizing them, sorting them out, and refreshing myself with what's in there. So here's the problem. Remember that charcoal? As soon as I added the matte medium, I got it on the brush, and then I transferred it onto the white of the flower. So now it's gray. And I tried to wipe it off. That didn't work. So before I continue gluing on, I'm just activating the charcoal, gluing with the matte medium here. And what I'm also doing is setting the charcoal. I'm locking it in, I'm putting a coat, basically sealing it so that it doesn't smear onto my focal images that I'm going to be gluing down. So I'm going to wash that brush before I go on. The charcoal has been set in. And now I can grab another flower, replace the one that got gray. And now I'm just going to glue down all my collage elements to make up my focal image and my sentiment. I knew better, but I still goofed, and that's okay. You can always solve the problem. Cleaning up the matte medium off the brush, putting it to soak, letting that dry. Now I decided I'm going to colorize these flowers, and I grabbed burnt sienna, I grabbed the alizarin crimson and I grabbed the Naples yellow, and I'm just watering it down and just painting over top of the flowers, getting a wash of it, a mix of this color. Now in the background it had been splattered with copper paint, so that's why I wanted that burnt sienna color in the flowers, so it goes with what's already been in the background. And I'm just adding more yellow, more red, more burnt sienna, just making it various colors. Adding the depth of color. I didn't like it, I could wipe it off like you saw me doing, because it's been sealed with the matte medium when I glued it down. Now I want to shade around the cup. To make it stand out. And a little more shading. All part of the finishing technique. And I splattered it with gold a little bit. Take off the tape, and there we go. Second page done. So there are the 2 pages that I was able to do in one session because I used things that were at the ready in my stash. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope this inspired you. Now go get creative.